Hello everyone, and welcome to the real 185th episode of Analyzing Evil, because I managed to misnumber an episode a while back, and here we'll be talking about our very thematic patron pick for July, Senator Armstrong, from Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. But you know what? Something just doesn't feel right here. What could it be? What could it be? I know. Alright, now that we're settled in this video, we're obviously going to be talking about Senator Armstrong, one of the most American villains to ever America in Japanese gaming history. Now, if you aren't familiar with who Armstrong actually is, and you've only seen him through
the memes,
then I hope you enjoy some deeper insight into his character, his motivations, and his goals. And for any Americans watching this video on the day of its release, I hope you have a happy Independence Day. Now, without further ado, let's begin. According to, go figure, the codec file titled Background on Armstrong, Stephen Armstrong was born and raised in Texas, and he eventually went on to play quarterback at the University of Texas. He was slated for the pros, but he wound up joining the Navy after graduating, stating that he wanted to serve his country instead. After his time in the Navy, he moved to Colorado where he served in the state Senate before getting elected to federal office as one of the two senators from Colorado. Now, there are a few things that typically come to mind when one thinks of America, like bald eagles, cowboys, apple pie, and barbecue. But you can also count football, rugged individualism, and a propensity to make things as big and bold as possible among those as well. And if there's one location in all of the United States that people think of when they think of Americans that embody all of these things, I'd put my wager on Texas. As is often said, everything is bigger in Texas, and that includes everything stereotypical about America. So to have a gargantuan man who's the personification of many different aspects of modern America hail from Texas is only too fitting. Because after all, that's what Senator Stephen Armstrong is, one giant stereotype. Now many stereotypes are either flat out wrong or hurtful, as applying generalizations to a group of people are just that, generalizations, and people are far more complex than X group does X thing because of X. However wrong stereotypes can be though, some are based in fact, even if that fact doesn't apply to everyone who might fall under that stereotype. For example, are all Americans big, crass, selfish, warmongering individuals? No, of course not. But some of us definitely are, and as a representative of that aspect of the American experience, Senator Armstrong is perfect. To me, he's like a combination of Stone Cold Steve Austin's wrestling persona and an anarchist Dick Cheney, a big bombastic son of a bitch who respects only strength and those with the will to impose that strength on the weak to get what they want. And I mean, you don't need to look any further than his dialogue, actions, and mannerisms to see what I'm talking about.
Cherry blossoms.
Yeah.
I take it you're not a fan?
No. They make me sick. I knew Johnson's team was working on some fancy-pants new reception area. But Jesus. When I get my hands on that candy ass, he'll be lucky if he can even carry his box of shit out of the building. Well, if it isn't Saucy Jack. Just a little too late. Patriots planted the seed. We don't need them around to filter and foster their memes any longer. We're spreading them just fine ourselves. Every American man, woman, and child. We're all sons of a patriots now! I'm not one of those beltway pansies. I could break the president in two with my bare hands! Don't fuck with this, Senator! Fuck all these lipstick lawyers and chicken shit bureaucrats! Fuck this 24/7 internet spew of trivia and celebrity bullshit! Fuck American pride! Fuck the media! Fuck all of it!
These are the aspects of this character that have made him a veritable icon of villainy. He's modern America as a villain personified, with a fuck you attitude and the gravitas to match it. But as gloriously obnoxious as someone like Senator Armstrong is, these traits aren't what make him a villain. It's his philosophy, motivation, and goals. To start, I think it's best that we get a handle on what exactly Senator Armstrong is trying to accomplish here by hearing it from the man himself.
Typical politician!
Big promises, but all talk.
What?
Jumpstart the economy. What a load of bullshit! All you care about is lining your own pockets. That and your approval ratings. You've got no principles. Just like all the rest. If America's gone to shit, you're just another maggot crawling in the pile.
All right, the truth then. You're right about one thing. I do need capital and votes. Wanna know why? I have a dream.
What?
That one day, every person in this nation will control their own destiny. A land of the truly free, damn it! A nation of action, not words, ruled by strength, not committee! Where the law changes to suit the individual, not the other way around! Where power and justice are back where they belong! In the hands of the people! Where every man is free to think, to act for himself. Fuck all these lunatic lawyers and chicken shit bureaucrats. Fuck this 24/7 internet spew of trivia and celebrity bullshit. Fuck American pride. Fuck the media. Fuck all of it! America's diseased, rotten to the core. There's no saving it. We need to pull it out by the roots. Wipe the slate clean. Burn it down! And from the ashes, a new America will be born! Evolved, but unchained! The weak will be purged, and the strongest will thrive, free to live as they see fit. They'll make America great again!
What the hell are you talking about?
You still don't get it. I'm using war as a business to get elected! So I can end war as a business. In my new America, people will die and kill for what they believe! Not for money, not for oil! Not for what they're told is right. Every man will be free to fight his own wars!
So in order to understand his mindset here, and how he aims to achieve his goals, we first need to talk about something that America as a nation is undeniably the best at, in both the Metal Gear universe, as well as the real world, at least at the time of this video's release. That being waging war, or perhaps more appropriately, financing wars, and the materials that one uses to wage them. In the Metal Gear universe, the course of world history has been heavily influenced by secret organizations like the Philosophers and the Patriots. But what Armstrong is talking about here is how in this universe, the Patriots, which at the end of their existence were run by AI, created a war economy in the 2010s that heavily incentivized warfare and propped up various private military companies, or PMCs, and weapons manufacturers to enrich these companies through the near-constant warfare that was being orchestrated behind the scenes. In this universe, that's made all the more harrowing by nanotechnology, cyborgs, the brainwashing and training of child soldiers, and highly advanced and futuristic military equipment. And as Armstrong points out, conning people into fighting in wars they don't believe in, for the sake of others' profits, is just flat out wrong, and is a practice worthy of being eliminated. But it's not just the people of the Metal Gear universe that are forced to suffer these issues, as much the same occurs in our own world, albeit on a much less severe scale. So let's look at some numbers to illustrate just how lucrative US defense contracts are and how outrageous they've gotten over the years. And bear in mind that all the figures I'm going to cite here have been adjusted for inflation as of July 2024. To start, let's use the Vietnam War as an example of what US military spending used to look like. The entire Vietnam War cost the United States $1 trillion, and to put that into perspective defense spending-wise, the US spent $1.35 trillion on their defense budget in that same period. To add even more perspective, the Vietnam War lasted for 20 years. So for such a long and protracted conflict, that number seems somewhat reasonable, even if it isn't when you consider that China and the USSR combined spent around $297 billion during the same period for the same purpose. But even so, the richest country in the world is bound to spend a bit more than its competitors, right? Sure, that sounds reasonable enough, especially when those numbers are backed up by the excuse of stopping the red tide of communism from consuming the world. Now let's take a look at what the United States has spent in a more recent time frame. Let's say in the year 2022, because I couldn't find some other figures that I needed for 2023. In 2022 alone, the United States defense budget was $782 billion, over 3/4 of what we spent over the course of 20 years for an entire war, and that's for just a single year. Now to be fair, that number isn't indicative of how much the various arms manufacturers and PMCs will profit off of the US government, as a lot of those dollars go towards maintaining current US military positions, salaries, and other logistical endeavors. You also have to consider that the advanced technology that the US uses today costs considerably more than the technology of yesteryear. A good example being the cost of the F-4 Phantom II, the primary jet plane used by the US military during the Vietnam War, which cost $22 million to produce. And our latest jet, the F-35, cost at the very minimum $82.5 million to produce. And it makes sense that over time, more advanced technology would cost more to produce. The problem here isn't necessarily the cost of the materials, but the profits that the companies manufacturing them make from selling them to the government. In 2022, just the top 5 weapons and military tech manufacturers, of which there are dozens if not hundreds, made a staggering $196 billion in revenue. Now, revenue isn't the same thing as profit, but even if you look at the profits they made, you still end up with a combined $25.3 billion. That is, if you exclude Boeing, who suffered a $2 billion loss in earnings in 2022, with Lockheed Martin, the largest of the companies, taking home $8.1 billion in earnings. And as will come as no surprise to many of you, these numbers generally have only increased since 9/11. It was a bit hard for me to find any accurate information on how much PMCs make on a yearly basis, so if any of you know the amount, please let us know down below. But suffice to say, the number that these companies earn is quite substantial. Now, to say that this topic is nuanced is an understatement, and there's a lot more to US military spending than simply stating that a lot of money goes into the pockets of people at the head of these companies, and that a lot of that money is made by capitalizing on the misery of others that's brought about by warfare, justified or not. I'm looking at you, Iraq War. But for what we're trying to accomplish here, that's pretty much all that needs to be said, though it's not just about the money itself, but how it's acquired and where it's spent. And as I just mentioned, it's typically acquired via excuses made to keep bolstering the US's military for any wars we're currently fighting, or to keep pace with, or outpace, other great powers. And while these companies obviously spend their money to fulfill the contracts they're given by the US Defense Department, they also spend that money lining the pockets of politicians to acquire those contracts. So it's a cycle of corruption built off of the suffering of others that only grows more unwieldy with each passing year. And the people in power, and the people at the heads of these weapon manufacturers, or personnel companies, profit greatly from war. And I don't really want to sound like a conspiracy theorist here, but at this point, I don't really think that what I've just said is a conspiracy, so much as it is the reality of American politics, corporatism, and militarism. Now, to be even more fair, this isn't strictly an American creation, as wars have been fought for profit since the beginning of recorded history. But we've certainly perfected it, and that perfection is definitely something that's worthy of being taken down a notch, or a few notches, which is what Senator Armstrong is attempting to do in his own universe. And that's an admirable goal to pursue, considering how many lives are wasted on a daily basis fighting for needless wars, even if being the #1 military power in the world has its advantages, both at home and abroad. But what Armstrong is trying to do in this story is decidedly less admirable. Senator Armstrong isn't trying to dismantle the war economy in order to make everyone's lives better. He's trying to dismantle the war economy to
Make America great again!
And just how is he going to make America great again? Well, let's listen again to a part of that clip I showed you earlier.
I do need capital and votes. Wanna know why? I have a dream
What?
that one day Every person in this nation will control their own destiny. A land of the truly free, damn it! A nation of action, not words, ruled by strength, not committee! Where the law changes to suit the individual, not the other way around! Where power and justice are back where they belong! In the hands of the people! Where every man is free to think, to act for himself! America is diseased, rotten to the core. There's no saving it. We need to pull it out by the roots. Wipe the slate clean. Burn it down! And from the ashes, a new America will be born! Evolved, but unchained! The weak will be purged, and the strongest will thrive, free to live as they see fit. They'll make America great again!
What the hell are you talking about?
You still don't get it. I'm using war as a business to get elected! So I can end war as a business. In my new America, people will die and kill for what they believe! Not for money, not for oil! Not for what they're told is right. Every man will be free to fight his own wars!
So Armstrong wants to use the aspects of this warmongering, vapid, and media-obsessed America to gain power for himself so he can dismantle these practices and put power back into the hands of the individual, creating an America where people aren't strung along by outside factors like ideology, media, or government policy, but who operate according to their own force of will and beliefs. Never mind that he's planning to do so by first emboldening those policies through Operation Tecumseh's false flag initiative and creating more wars before he ends them. Oh, and that he's also using impoverished child soldiers that he's had abducted, turned into cyborgs, and fine-tuned to serve his ambitions, children that he's apparently more than willing to slaughter if the need arises.
All right. Made your point.
Oh, thank you for understanding.
Send what you have now. I'll destroy any unharvested inventory.
Okay? But have you any idea what they cost?
Last I checked, children weren't exactly rare in the part of the world. Millions of them, in fact. You can get more once we set up a new lab. They lead lives of hunger and pain. We're performing a service here for them and the cities they burden.
But just gathering the donors required a significant investment.
Yes, you'll get the money. Accounting will be in touch.
Gracias. I assure you we will dispose of our inventory the instant we can confirm payment.
Are we done here?
But all those little insignificant details aside, what Armstrong has in mind for America might seem like a pretty smart idea, but that's only when you take what he's for and what he's against at face value. Yes, the media, the government, and everything and everyone else in between have their own narratives they're trying to push, and those narratives end up harming people's lives. And tying in these facts with any given solution might make you think, yeah, this guy's got a point, doesn't he? Sure, he does have a point, but it's a pretty terrible point to make. What Armstrong is advocating here is imposing social Darwinism, which is essentially natural selection applied to human society, and anarchist capitalist principles, which is essentially anarchism with allowances made for corporations and other big business entities, onto the American populace to promote the most extreme form of individualism that you could possibly imagine. And even that might sound fine enough to the uninitiated. As what's so bad about giving the power back to the individual? Well, giving more power to the individual isn't necessarily a bad thing, but social Darwinism and anarchy, especially when taken to the extremes that Armstrong is talking about, certainly are. In Armstrong's America, the strong would take whatever they wanted, when they wanted, for any reason they might have, simply because they can. And for the weak who lack the will and determination to make themselves strong, well, they're shit out of luck. What this pretty much boils down to is that anyone who's physically gifted, intellectually gifted, well-connected, or wealthy will become a god in this new America, and everyone else will perish in the wake of their ambitions. But not only will the weak suffer, but the strong as well, because the strong will inevitably have to fight others with strength and eliminate them to fortify or defend their positions. Whoever has the most money will win because they are by default the strongest, and laws will change to suit their needs. Whoever have the biggest muscles and the biggest arsenals will be hired by the people with the most money, and they'll win too. If you eliminate current corporations and the media, all those people who previously had power through those means will grab power once again by spending all their money to take whatever they want from everyone else by force, subterfuge, or manipulation. And I wouldn't be surprised if Armstrong's policies dropped the population from the hundreds of millions down to less than 10 million. So if that's the world that Armstrong is trying to create, and he's trying to create it by getting elected, how in the hell is anyone with half a brain going to support such an extreme idea? Because of presentation. As Armstrong says at one point, he doesn't write his own speeches. He only tells the American public what they want to hear, not what he's actually about. And over time, he'll slowly make the changes necessary to see his ambitions come to fruition by convincing the American people that it's in their best interest. And with a populist approach like Armstrong's, that becomes all the more easy to accomplish. At one point in that speech we reviewed earlier, Armstrong mentions that America is rotten to the core, which is not exactly a far-fetched belief, but it is one that's ripe for exploitation. You'll find that a lot of Americans that you'll talk to, no matter their background or beliefs, agree with the statement that America is rotten to the core. But everyone you talk to will have their own definition of what that means. One person might say it's because we've abandoned our traditions and values, and the next might say it's because we're still clinging to those traditions and values. One person might say it's because we've turned our backs on God. Another might say it's because we haven't completely thrown God into the waste bin. Some will blame our economic woes on too many taxes. Some will blame them on there not being enough taxes. And so on and so forth. When it comes down to it, most Americans, no matter what their beliefs are proud to be Americans, but they aren't proud of America. And in order to reinstill said pride by eliminating the rot at America's core, someone doesn't even need to make concrete promises to convince people that they'll rid them of this rot. They only need to cater to the attitudes of the majority. Now, avoiding some sort of current-day political discussion down in the comments is probably unavoidable at this point, but I definitely don't want to make it worse by mentioning them too much. So I won't, but I'm sure most of you heard a little phrase Armstrong said earlier and immediately thought of a certain man. That phrase being "Make America Great Again." However, this phrase was actually coined by another political candidate and eventual president, Ronald Reagan. Part of the allure of President Reagan's campaign for the presidency was his promise to make America great again, to reverse the woes that occurred under the watch of the previous decade's administrations, and bring back some of the glory that we lost. Not only that, but he painted himself as a true-blooded, all-around American who would be tough on crime, tough on our enemies, and tough on anyone who stood in the way of American prosperity. I'm not going to comment on whether or not he was successful in doing so here, but I don't need to, because the point I'm trying to make is that in the end, whether he did or not, didn't really matter as far as getting him elected is concerned, because a lot of people don't really care if you can fulfill your promises. They only care that you're making them in the first place. Of course, what I've been talking about for the last few minutes isn't unique to America, because populism can be found everywhere. But this is what American populism looks like, and adopting a populist platform is only made all the more tenable when you have a strongman at the helm, because people love a man who's charismatic enough to paint themselves as a mighty force in the world, whether that's true or not. In Armstrong's case, he's about as strong as you can get, physically and personally. And when you factor in that America is in a recession at the time this story takes place in this universe due to the dismantlement of the Patriots and the war economy, you have the perfect recipe for a man like Armstrong to come along and convince people that he knows best, and he'll definitely make everything better. It doesn't even matter, as Radin so eloquently states, that Armstrong is clearly batshit insane, because there's quite enough insanity present in American politics as it is. And in fact, insanity can even be quite beneficial to a political campaign. People love big and bold characters, even if they are insane. And that's because who they are is different from the drab, mundane, and obviously superficial charm of traditional politicians. We love the bombastic and the boorish, and we love a strongman projecting the strength of the #1 country in the world. Some opponents of the Make America Great Again mantra like to make the point that America was never great, thus it can never be great again. This simply isn't true. America has been, was, and is great, but it has been, was, and is great only for some. For example, if people have fond memories of the 1950s to the 1990s and claim that it was the golden age of America, perhaps they're speaking about values, policies, or the overall climate during that time period that just had a different feel than the one we have nowadays. And while there are plenty of people from many different backgrounds and creeds who feel this way, if we're talking about greatness as far as prosperity is concerned, that time period in American history was undeniably most prosperous for one group in particular: straight, white, middle and upper class males. If you were born a straight, white, middle or upper class male in America anytime before, say, 1970, you essentially won the genetic lottery, as you had all the benefits of American society at your disposal, with none of the downsides. Now, as you'll notice, I said middle and upper class straight white males, as poverty is poverty, no matter what your background is. But even then, you had the advantage over someone else in a similar situation who didn't share your background or inclinations. Armstrong is one such white male who, while excelling in sports due to his natural athleticism and being a man who continued to hone his body as he aged, didn't earn much of his strength, but was handed everything he was given due to the circumstances of his birth and his connections. Now, the America that Armstrong is looking to create wouldn't exactly be a recreation of this type of social and political climate, as Armstrong's America would favor the strong, no matter what their race, beliefs, or sexual orientation are. But it's rather similar in principle when you consider that his system would foster preferential treatment for one group, in this case, that group being the strong. And you also have to consider that Armstrong's philosophy was formulated due to his experiences with a previous system that afforded preferential treatment to one group. As Ryden points out, Armstrong never knew what it was like to be counted amongst the weak, to be hungry, to have to steal and kill just to survive. Even his nanotech augments aren't some ingenious invention that were birthed by the complex mind of Stephen Armstrong. They're powers that he bought using the advantages he's been given in life to enhance his own strength. He's not a man who rose from the muck and wants to lift others out of the muck. He's a man who was born with privilege, who wants to make a world where the people with the same strength and privilege have the opportunity to crush the weak so they can make their own lives what they want it to be. Armstrong caters to people's sentimentality for the way things used to be and the desire for quick, decisive action to eliminate problems and bring back the better times that people erroneously believe were better. And in that way, if he had lived, he'd probably have managed to convince a lot of people that all of his ideas were great ideas. But I've spent a lot of time talking about how bad his ideas are. So now let's try and see if there would be anything good that would come from Armstrong's America. Now, most ideas that don't deal in the harm of innocence, no matter how opposed you personally might be to them, typically have some merits to them when you try to examine them through an unbiased lens. Whether the merits of those ideas are practical or not can only be discovered through further scrutiny. But regardless, you'll often find that pushing a society towards any extreme is far more detrimental than it is helpful. We often forget that life is far more nuanced than it might appear to be on a surface level, that the world isn't black and white, and that as long as an idea doesn't involve the harm of innocence, then that idea should be allowed to be a part of the conversation, even if they're eventually revealed to be untenable or ridiculous when studied further. There's a reason why there are opposing viewpoints in this world, and not just a universal ideology that we can all look to for objective truth, because there isn't one. And because there isn't, you have to consider that you don't know all the answers, and that you might find that someone whose beliefs contradict your own could have some of those answers. But when considering the merits of Armstrong's philosophy, we first have to keep in mind that he does promote the harm of innocence. But even if we were willing to ignore that fact, I think you'll find there's very little that's actually helpful rather than harmful. Like Armstrong says, the media sucks, profiting off war is evil, governments abuse their power, and people die for causes they don't believe in. But those aren't really tenets exclusive to Armstrong's ideology. They're just facts. So in actuality, aside from the notion that you shouldn't blindly give yourself up to collective consciousness and what others tell you is the common good, as we should all take the time to carefully examine all belief sets and formulate our own opinions on the world without acquiescing to the pressures of those around us or society at large, there's very little good that comes from aligning yourself to Armstrong's line of thinking. But even so, in his final moments, Senator Armstrong does leave us with something to consider.
Well done, Jack. Your dream dies with you. Oh, maybe not. You've guaranteed the status quo will go on. For a while longer, at least. War will continue as an institution, as an industry. Men will fight for reasons they don't understand. Causes they don't believe in. But at least I'll leave a worthy successor. You, Jack. You carve your own path. Use whatever methods you see fit. You don't let legal bullshit get in the way. And if it costs a few lives, so be it. Deep inside, we're kindred spirits. You and I.
It's true. With Armstrong gone and the false flag operation succeeding, the status quo will continue. War will continue to be an institution and a business, and people will continue to suffer. Even so, the status quo, as flawed as it is far more preferential to the social Darwinism and anarchy of Armstrong's America, because all that will bring is prosperity for a select few and death for so many, many more. I'd say it's far better to recognize the faults in the status quo and take positive actions to fix those faults that don't involve the needless deaths of countless individuals, to try and make the world a better place for all, rather than just a better place for some. And who knows, if we ever get a sequel to this game, we might get to see what impact Armstrong's advice to Raiden had on him. For at the end of this story, it seems that Raiden is well on his way to making the world a better place in any way he can, by whatever means necessary. And it would be interesting to see how his story ends. But for now, we'll just have to be satisfied with the story of one crazed senator, a character that's a magnificent villain to watch in action, but one who embodies a monstrous evil that I hope more than anything we won't see manifested in our own world. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. What are your thoughts on Armstrong? Let me know down below, and leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see featured while you're at it. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. A big thank you to all of my subscribers, my patrons, and anyone who's decided to honor me with a super thank, and a most vile thank you to those whose names you're seeing on screen now. Join the channel's Discord server and subreddit to interact with myself and the community, and follow me on the social media platforms listed down below to keep up with the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon.